calls for those who are responsible for looting and violent unrest to face the might of the law. The Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Bonang Mohale, joins me now to talk about this. Dr. Mohale, good evening, and thank you very much for your time tonight here on In Focus.
Thank you for having me, my dear brother Babu Mdluli.
Now, we spoke to the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal moments ago. He says, look, there are various elements at play here. The instigators, the planners, the looters, those who burnt things, and those who violently attacked others along racial lines. All these people must be brought to book. Are they the true cause, root cause of what actually happened here?
So fortunately, life is not as easy as that. It's not normally one thing, because you and I are not just one thing. We are a confluence of many things. In fact, I'm a product of major influences that have shaped, described, defined who I am. So with this looting, for me, we saw an intersectionality amongst ethno-tribalism, rampant criminality, and genuine desperation. Genuine desperation you could understand, because we have been buffeted on all sides, probably in the last decade. Starting with the 9 wasted years of state capture, we were already in a recession. Moody's did not help by joining both Fitch and Standard & Poor's in rating us below investment grade. As we had said before, once we are rated below investment grade, then it's the second, the third, and the fourth layer. On average, it takes you 7 years to pull yourself out of that. Lastly, of course, by the time the pandemic got hold of us, we were already prostate, face down, absolutely finished. Now we have added another dimension on the 4 that are already making life difficult for us, this looting. And honestly, when you look at the root cause of this, of course, it manifests in many ways. Number 1, it will be the inequality that is widening. Number 2, it will be racism that is now at an all-time high. But also remember, you have black graduates roaming the streets hopelessly. Yeah. Public education has collapsed. Public health care continue to fail the poor and the vulnerable. And lawlessness has now become an epidemic. But I think the root cause for us as business people is, of course, this is treasonous. Of course, this is arsonists. These are common thieves that are running scared. Because when they see the former president going to jail, they are saying, oh, it's my turn to go too. And you see, state capture thrives in chaos. They are trying to create chaos. But for us, it's very clear that what was targeted is the infrastructure, is the backbone of this economy. Because they start with the N3. That moves goods all the way to KZN, but also to Gauteng. Between the 2 of them, there's more than 40% of the GDP of this country. Then they go to the N2, but also look at the modus operandi. They go and loot the malls, the major distribution centers, and over 3 consecutive days, day and night, they even repudiate the terms of the National Disaster Management Act. And I'll take Value Logistics Mall as an example. First day, it's looted the whole day and night, even after 2100 hours, which is a curfew period, and the police do nothing. Right. And then the second day, they do the same. And the third, when it's absolutely empty, they then ban it. Why would you do that when you know that these major distribution centers are there really to serve the entire country, and in our situation, also the region, especially the SACU trade bloc, right, which is really Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini.
Now, precisely when you look at that method of operation, when you look at the non-response from security forces, when you look at the disconnected messaging that is coming from the Ministry of Defense and the President, and you hear today the police minister saying, I didn't get any intelligence report. When you look at all that, you get a sense that going after 12 instigators who are external partners is really just the tip of the iceberg. Are we prepared to go to the root cause of this particular matter and actually deal with it in its entirety?
But you see, we chose deliberately to have a smaller South African police services. That is intelligence-led. The two go together. So our South African police service is 100,000 manpower short. You know why? Because we stole all the money. When you steal money, eventually gets finished. So where we are now as a country, as a people with great natural endowment, we're actually technically bankrupt to provide service delivery, to look after the people that are hit by the pandemic, to help our schools to provide the technologies that will allow our kids to be able to learn, but also to give some sort of comfort for the businesses that are really decimated, especially tourism and hospitality industry. Look at an award-winning African airline, 84-year-old SAA, but also Mengu, but SA Technical Services. We don't have money now to rescue it because we stole all the money. Secondly, there's also a piece where these police people, first the intelligence comes, 9 issues are raised, but we have no capacity to process, to understand, and then plan for it. You see, the jailing of the former president didn't hit us by surprise. The commission that he himself set up, that he wrote the terms of reference for, he then decides to ignore it, and he deems himself in contempt of court, in a court of law. Therefore, no trial is needed. Then we have 3 months to prepare for his sentencing. The apex court writes to him to say, what type of sentence do you think is appropriate? The intelligence looks at that, they don't prepare. SAPS looks at that, they don't prepare. The Metro Police looks at that, they don't prepare. Therefore, we were caught flat-footed, unprepared, ill-equipped. But also, look at our police services. They've run out of bulletproof vests. They've run out of cars. They've run out of rubber bullets. They've run out of tear gas and live ammo. But also, it's not often that people who loot because of hunger go to a mall armed. So when the police were firing rubber bullets, these arsonists, treasonists, were responding with live ammunition. So you can see that the president is absolutely correct when he says the people wanted to commit economic sabotage. And I think all of us, 60 million South Africans, will be fools if we allow ourselves to be used by people who are running scared. I call them the dirty dozen, who are now, like James Hadley says, the guilty are afraid.
Let's come back to you in a moment. Let's continue with the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Bonang Mohale, in a moment here on In Focus when we return. Here on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. This hour we continue with the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Bonang Mohale, who says acts of treason and sabotage should be dealt with swiftly in our country. We'll get more from him in a moment. Plus, of course, get a sense of what's been making news this hour here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Let's look at your headlines now. The Democratic Alliance says it does not support the postponement of the 2021 local government elections as recommended by Justice Moseneke. Police Minister Bheki denies claims he received an intelligence tip-off about the deadly civil unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. The AmaZulu Prime Minister says King Misuzulu Kazwelithini remains in charge despite royal family divisions. Welcome back. Thanks for staying on as mounting calls continue to rise in society for those responsible for the unrest last week to be brought to book. The Vice Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Bonang Mohale, says acts of treason and sabotage against the people, property and the economy need to be dealt with swiftly and decisively. The fear, Dr. Mohale, in society is that the weakest links in the chain are being chased right now, and probably they will be arrested. 3 of them have appeared in court. I think 6, we are told, have been arrested so far. These are external partners who are carrying this out, instigating on social media and so on and so forth. However, the masterminds are not anywhere to be seen and will likely maybe even be protected.
Babu Mdluli, you have hit the nail on the head. You see, the ordinary South Africans don't need any intelligence. These treasonists, have tested the resolve of this ANC-led government, and they found it weak and administratively poor. MKMVA go to Nkandla in direct contravention of the National Disaster Management Act. They convene there. There is no social distancing, no wearing of masks, no quarantining after being exposed to other people. In absolute defiance and showing the middle finger, and we do nothing. These Amadela Ngokubona, for the last 5 years at least, have been going to state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, mostly in KwaZulu-Natal, and construction companies, and demanding free equity, not wanting to buy, and demanding that you must hire people, not from KZN, but from our gangs. They go to Richard Bay Mineral, they assassinate in broad daylight the general manager, and we are surprised when Rio Tinto declares force majeure. These are the same people that went on to loot trucks in one day, 32 trucks, in a clear act of xenophobia. And again, in all those incidences, we did absolutely nothing. So the powder keg was lit, the tinderbox was going. This was just the tip of the iceberg. And again, they found the police absolutely acquiescent and did nothing. Now we look back and say, but we were taken by surprise. How is that? You know, when I was a young boy, under apartheid, you'll go to Soweto. I come from Katlehong. The Secret Service will know that you're in Soweto. When midnight hits, they will knock on that house and say, why are you sleeping here? Because you don't have permission to sleep in Soweto. They knew. We inherited an infrastructure that is the envy of the other African countries. All we had to do was just maintain it. 27 years later, not only have we stolen the cables at 380 volts and the rail on which the train is supposed to move, but we have stolen the buildings one brick at a time. It's a classical case when the top echelons steal photocopying paper and pencil from their companies and their governments. They give permission to the rest of the company and the citizenry that not only can you steal the furniture, but you can start stealing the entire building one brick at a time. Babu Mhluli, you see, this thing called liberal democracy rests on 4 pillars. Number 1, it's free press. Number 2, it's a constitutional democracy, the supremacy of the constitution, not of the executives. Thirdly, it depends on the independent civil society. And then lastly, on the rule of law. We begin to die, our lives begin to end when we keep quiet about things that genuinely matter. The rating agencies are only looking for 4 things: economic, fiscal, and institutional strength, and sustainability to risk events. Every risk event that has hit us, when most countries it will take them 2 years to recover, it takes us 20 years. This looting, this burning, this carnage, this wanton destruction of property has taken this economy 20 years back. At the time that we're having 42% unemployment rate with expanded definition, 60% youth unemployment. There is the elements that are immediately a danger that were present during the Arab Spring. With the inequality rising, you get surprised that people are just vulnerable, waiting for any powder keg, any stimulus that will set them off. And we are really caught flat-footed. There is no response. How do you loot a mall for 3 consecutive days and you ban it? You know, the first morning, 200 malls. By the end of 3 days, 800 companies and retail centers had been looted. I mean, when somebody goes to a blood bank and steals the fridges and spill the blood on the floor, knowing that when I come out of here, I might personally be shot and I might need this type O blood myself for infusion, you know that not only have we lost our moral compass, but actually we don't care. When people go to a distribution center of a pharmaceutical company, now Netcare has to import medication because we have just destroyed it. And yet those very same people Not a week later, the next day, they were queuing for 3 hours for bread, for milk.
Do we have, though, the time and the luxury to do a proper root cause analysis? I'll tell you why. Because, for example, you mentioned the agencies like Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and so forth and so on. I had a conversation last night. I'm going to get her name correct because I sometimes mix it up. Dr. Mampela Rampele. I think that's how you say. And she says, right, 212 people have died in South Africa. What did Moody's say? What did the Rand do? Nothing. We've got to ask ourselves a question. Why did these indicators not respond when 212 people died in Phoenix?
But you see, we need to be very circumspect about how we read the events. So they are saying, look, our constitution is strong. Institutions of democracy are embedded. But look at the Rand pre-COVID. It was, and indeed pre the looting, it was the strongest performing currency of all emerging markets. 3 days after the looting, it lost 3%. And up until now has not recovered to pre-looting levels. So you can't just look at absolute numbers and say by today, it's Tuesday, in fact by Friday, it was 1451. Therefore, it has strengthened. You have to look at it before. The same way that you run a company, you could pat yourself on the back and say, in 2021, we're doing better than 2020. In fact, you have to compare yourself with 2019. So I think as a people with great natural endowments, we need to catch a wake up. Because when people loot and they get away with it, when people put in and they loot trucks so that they can come back and loot more, a factory in Mobeni, you saw a queue that was 3 kilometers long, right up to the freeway. There's only one entrance and one exit. And again, the police did absolutely nothing. That's where I think it needs to break our heart. So the South Africans are scared, they are traumatized, they are not able to sleep at night because we pay marginal tax rate of more than 42%.
Yeah.
The highest countries in the world, Scandinavians, it's 50%. You'll say, no, but we are less. But they pay 50%. The schooling is free. Security is free. Healthcare is free. In South Africa, you have to provide your own private security, your own private medical aid. You have to provide your own private schooling. So by the time you deduct the 15% VAT on everything that you buy, actually we are more than 65% of every rand that we spend, we're giving it to government. To do what? To steal it.
The problem will resurface. That's the fear of many South Africans because it seems we are creating an ecosystem where people who wish to nurture scapegoats for their survival are allowed to thrive.
Exactly. You see, I take a lot of comfort in what the president said when he addressed the 5th State of the Nation address. He distills the 4 foremost overarching priorities. He says, number 1, we have to overcome this coronavirus pandemic. Number 2, he says, we need to accelerate our economic recovery. Number 3, he says, we must implement the socio-economic reforms so that we create sustainable jobs and we deliver this inclusive economic growth. Lastly, he says, we must defeat state capture and build a capable state. All those 4 absolutely critical. For the next 20 years, we don't have to think about anything else. And yet, even with the coronavirus, this government is woefully behind with the rollout of vaccines. And we have always known that vaccine rollout is a race because the country that gets herd immunity first and can say we've defeated the pandemic will be able to reap the pent-up global tourism. At the moment, our hotels are on their knees. The casinos are on their knees. The entire hospitality industry is on its knees. And the government doesn't even have enough money to help them. And yet, how much did we get? Not 500 billion economic stimulus, 577 billion. Because when you add what we got from the African Development Bank and the IMF, there's another 77 billion. What have we done with it? So as business, we have always said, we want to work hand in glove with government. We've got systems and processes. We know how to deliver mega projects on time, on full, and in budget. And yet, what did the government do? No. We want to take the credit and the glory for the vaccine rollout. When the president set us herd immunity target of 67% in January, At that time, the math told us that we need to be vaccinating at a rate of 100,000 a day, every day. It would have taken us 400 days or 13.3 months, which meant we're only going to get herd immunity in the middle of 2022 without any exogenous factors. But where we are at the end of March, after the then Minister of Health, Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, says, I want to have inoculated 1.2 million frontline workers by the end of March. End of March. Even if you include the Sisonke program, where we're getting batches of 60 to 80,000 vaccines as part of the J&J experiment, we didn't buy a single one. You include those, we're on 250,000, 350,000. That should have taken us 3 days. Now where we are, the president gets it. He then says, we need to accelerate quickly to a run rate of 300,000 a day, every day. We celebrate that we are just reaching 5 million. 5 million compared to 40 million, it's only 10%. Then it means by next year, we will have to do 10 million. At the end of that, we would have only done 15 million. And yet we wanted to do 40 million. So I think as business, we really want to help because we've got, Mines can inoculate 400,000 people in 3 months. Discovery Health can inoculate their 2 million members in 6 months because they know where they are. They've got facilities that have already been accredited. Imperial, the Bigvest Group Limited can move staff from one point to the other because that's what they do. In fact, SAB has demonstrated beyond any shadow of doubt that they've got twice as many shebeens as there are schools in this country, and they deliver there successfully twice a week. Our government can't deliver there once a year, books just to Limpopo. But if you work hand in glove and you put the books in the beer trucks, you can get them delivered twice a week. I don't know why the reticence and the reluctance to work with business, especially because President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, he himself is an ex-lawyer, a unionist, a business person, now a politician. We could not have prayed for a better person who's got a broad perspective, understands the need of all the stakeholders. To do what? To be able to deliver effectively service delivery. And we don't even have to reinvent the wheel. Singapore, for the last 40 years of Lee Kuan Yew, they chased only 3 things: meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. That's all. And they pulled themselves by their own bootstraps, and they were among the top 5 per capita highest income in the world. China, for the last 60 years, up until 2010, were chasing only 2 things and 2 things only: personal security and economic security. And they've done that. They are not changing. With us, you can count at least 9 economic players. And today, even though the NDP 2030 is our economic vision, there are still some people who articulate the new growth path. There are still some people who think it's as Giza. There are still some people who hanker for growth, employment, and redistribution strategy. And there are still people who still remember the Reconstruction and Development Program. And the president now gives us another one, the Economic Reconstruction and Redistribution Program. And you can see that we are very good at developing plans, and our plans are really well classed. But it was General George Patton who said, good wars are won by good execution, not great plans, because good execution will save even a mediocre plan.
Dr. Mohale, let's leave it there for tonight. Of course, we can ponder on these issues for the whole night. The Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Bonang Mohale, I appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining.